We're ready to go.
Okay, we call this August 11th, 2022 meeting of the AMAC.
Cole Hayes,
Here.
Brad Coy,
Here.
Todd Van Ho,
Present.
Luke Poland,
Sean Baskey here for Luke Bowler.
Okay, Steve, can you hear us?
I can, it went very quiet there for a while, and then when you asked the question, yes, I heard you.
Okay, so am I clear now?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, Matt Stitchick, or Brian Lindemood, Yami Alimi. Thank you. We're here, full house today.
Yeah, good on everybody. Can you also do the public involvement announcement, please?
Of course, AMAT's committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by a staff or consultant. After the committee has had a chance to discuss the business item, the public is then invited to formally comment. After the public has had a chance to comment, the committee will take action. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn off your camera when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Sorry, the camera is frozen on the owl.
Oh, boy. Okay, go ahead, I'll work on it.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is actually to approve the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lindemood, seconded by Mr. Van Ho. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Thank you.
Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Okay, the agenda is approved. Now to the meeting minutes. Do we have a motion for approving the July 14th, 2022 meeting minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Van Ho, seconded by Mr. Lindemood. Are there any changes? One change that I saw is that it has Sean Holland as DOT MPF. I think he's down now, right? Okay.
Sean Holland is Dowell. Thank you.
Any other changes? Okay, are there any objections to approving the minutes with the one change of Sean Holland? There are no objections. The July 14th, 2022 minutes are approved as amended. Item number 5, our action items. 5A, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue project closeout letter. Are you taking that one on?
A little bit, and then we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
So, as you can see from the memos in front of you, I received a memo from DOT and PF project manager Noah King, who is here today, on the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue extension project. This is a project that was put into the 2019 through 2022 TIP and was started work. And during the process of it, it was discovered that there are significant impacts to vulnerable populations in the area. And the project team did the best they could to come up with solutions, but it looks like the benefits are outweighed by the impacts. Make sure I said that correctly. And the project team, DOT and the municipality of Anchorage, are recommending that AMAT close out the MLK project as a no-build. I believe it's as a no-build alternative, or is that what still has to be found? Bill?
Yes, it's to avoid coming to the conclusion of having a no build.
Okay. Okay, so Noah's here to help answer questions, and you can see the lengthy justification that they put together on the memo from DOT and PF. I didn't write a very long memo because they did a really good job kind of explaining everything, so I just wanted to do a quick, simple memo. The action being requested today is that the Technical Advisory Committee review the project memo from DOT and recommend that the Policy Committee support closeout of the project. Thank you.
Perfect. Are there any questions from the committee? That's one question that I have is doing it this way, we're not on the hook to pay back any money because we're coming to a conclusion that closes it out versus.
That's the intention, that we close out with FHWA participation. At this point, we don't spend any more money and you don't have to pay any more match money as a municipality or anyways.
Or pay anything back. Yeah, have you confirmed with FHWA that this is the process?
We've confirmed that this is the correct way to proceed with that request. And so it will likely, in my opinion, be acceptable.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from members of the public or policy committee?
I do have a question. Were there any properties purchased in advance to complete the project?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, are there any comments online?
Not seeing any more. It's okay, we got it, Jim. It's fine. No comments at this time.
Okay, what is the will of the committee?
I move to recommend to the policy committee support the close out of the problem.
Okay, moved by Mr. Van Hook, seconded by Mr. Avini. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you for coming on. Next item, 5B, 2023 through 2026 TIP air quality conformity determination. And it looks like this has two parts, right?
That is correct.
Part of the-
It is a little confusing on the agenda, and I apologize for that. We'll clean it up for the policy committee. We need to approve the air quality conformity determination first, and then move on to the TIP tables itself with the narrative. And we'll do that as a single. We can do it as a single item of resolution for the table and the narratives.
Got it. And so that second item is the 2023 TIP Transportation Improvement Program narrative. Program and the narrative. So that's like three different things. Okay. Sounds good. I see what you mean by it being a little confusing. And it looks like this is yours too, right, to walk us through?
Yeah, I'll just do really quickly for the air quality conformity determination. Matt Stitchick did a lot of effort to get this done, completed in a very short time period. So this is the air quality conformity determination that has to review the TIP because we are a limited maintenance area. We do have to do this. And it's basically the transportation air quality conformity that says that the TIP projects, no project or element of the TIP will jeopardize continued implementation of any provided PM10 control strategies for the Eagle River area. And Matt can help correct me if I'm wrong. Basically making sure that we can still implement our SIP measures for the transportation control measures to keep ourselves an air quality team or within the boundaries. So this is done every new TIP. It's also done with any major amendment or amendment we have for the TIP. We have to do it for the MTP as well. So it's a pretty common thing that we do. This was actually done, the interagency consultation team met on June 24th to review the contents of the draft conformity report and to provide their support for the methods used in the development. It was released for a 30-day public comment period, and no comments were received on the air quality conformity determination. The ask today is for the Technical Advisory Committee to review the determination and recommend approval to the Policy Committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments on the air quality conformity determination? Or questions from the committee? One question that I did have as I was reading through it, I did appreciate the in-depth explanation, given that it went through and explained the whole history, which was really helpful. It did make me wonder if this was triggered as a need in 1970, and it shows that for the past 20 years, we just consistently have been doing fantastic. is there ever gonna be a time when we don't have to do this, or is it like in perpetuity, we will forever have to do this?
So, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a time when it can end. Basically, what happens is when you trigger non-attainment, you then have to kind of start a cycle of 2 10-year periods of making sure you don't get into non-attainment again. And then after those 2 10-year cycles are over, you are back in attainment. So our CO non-attainment, I believe, is done in 3 years or,
That is done in July 2024.
Okay.
And
PM10 is 2023. For the PM10.
and we have submitted,
2023, yeah, for the PM10.
we have submitted to EPA our second 10-year plan, and essentially an update that sees us through the end of that 20-year cycle. And I don't think they have, you know, EPA has.
EPA approved
Okay, because that's,
November 9, 2021.
excellent, because they have up to a year to do that. And we submitted about a year ago, so they're ahead of schedule.
Okay.
so we'll have to keep doing these air quality determinations for transportation until we finish that second 10-year cycle for the PM10 in Eagle River. After that is done, we are no longer in a limited maintenance plan. We go into an attainment area, and we don't have to do this. And we can take 5 years to update our MTP instead of the 4.
Got it. And then we just need to keep our air quality high, so we don't go back into any.
Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if, even after we get out of the limited maintenance, if we meet exceedances, we can go back into a non-attainment area, correct? Or are we good forever once we?
No, you can go back into a non-attainment situation by having violations of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We work very hard for that.
So basically, our transportation control measures plus everything else we're doing, we're gonna have to do in perpetuity.
Yeah, which, I mean, I like the air quality we have here. So I'm all for keeping it high quality, but it will be nice to not have quite as many regulations and a little bit longer to get through the tip. Or through the FMP.
I asked Cindy if she'd be willing to stay for that 10-year cycle, and she'd laugh as she walked out the door. So,
So that she could see it actually come to like completion, the full circle. Okay, perfect. Thanks for answering this question. Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, so the monitoring device on Eagle River, will that continue to always monitor?
Yes.
At some point,
For very training purposes. We have to continue to monitor.
In perpetuity
okay.
for PM10,
For PM10.
because that was a non-attainment area.
Okay, any other questions? Any questions from the policy committee or members of the public? Okay, what is the will of the committee?
Yeah, I move to recommend the approval of the 2023-2026 air quality conformance determination to the policy committee.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Leamy, seconded by Mr. Lyon. Are there any objections? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. So now we'll look at the actual tip and tip narrative. Second half of this fight.
so I'll do just a brief walkthrough of these since you have all seen this for many years or for many months now. So the next things before you are the tip tables themselves. So these contain the projects that AMATs are going to fund with its AMATs allocation, tables 2 through 6, and then 7 through 9. How many do we have now? 10? I have to keep track of it. Thank you, 10. Are other sources of federal funding or significant, regionally significant projects that we have to include as part of our tip. So these are the tables that the air quality conformity determination covered, and the narrative also covers this. Staff has done extensive work on this project, so I do want to first say thanks, staff, very much for all of your help, because we did a lot pretty quickly to get this at this stage we're at right now. Did go through our public comment period. We got 190 plus comments on it, so we did respond to all of those comments. We provided that before the committees a couple of months ago and got your guys' review and recommended a draft approval to be used as part of the interagency consultation process. And now it is before you for final approval at this time. I do want to just quickly note, as you've just approved the air quality conformity determination, changes to the tip itself are going to need to be limited to minor, small changes or no changes at all. If you want to make significant changes such as deleting projects or adding projects, we will have to do the air quality conformity determination all over again. And please do not think this is me trying to pull a fast one on you. This is a requirement by the feds that you approve the air quality conformity determination before you approve the tip. Because if you approve the tip first and make a whole bunch of changes, then it doesn't match up with your air quality conformity determination. You no longer meet the federal requirements. And just note, one of the federal requirements to have an air quality conformity determination is to be fiscally constrained in your tip. So that's why we're pretty strict of, if you want to add a project, who's going to pay for it, what project's going to be delayed, or et cetera, stuff like that. So it's up, the narrative kind of gives a brief outline of the tip itself, the process used in the development of the tip, talking about performance measures. As you'll note in there, we are going to be updating some of those performance measures because they have not been updated at this point. We are underway, especially for the pavement management. We just had a meeting on that today, and the non-single occupancy vehicle measures. One new piece in here that I will talk about is Appendix B, the self-certification statement. So this is a requirement that AMATS has this statement in here that says we are complying with all federal regulations that are outlined in the self-certification statement, so that we're following all development requirements for the tip, so we have a competitive process, that we follow all our non-attainment or maintenance areas, since we're in the maintenance area requirements for the Clean Air Act, that we follow all Title VI requirements, that we follow all the non-discrimination requirements, the disadvantaged business requirements. It kind of goes through the list of everything in there that we're following. So this is a statement by AMATS that says we are following all these requirements. Just so you know, 90% of these are found in our Title VI plan that AMATS has had for a number of years and is constantly following. DOT and the municipality of Anchorage are also helping to ensure adherence to all the federal requirements when we put out an RFP or a project. So we do follow the DBE requirements through that. This is a requirement that we have to have in here. So depending on how things go, the final signatures will be me as the coordinator saying, yes, we do follow all these requirements. And then I'll send it to DOT headquarters for them to sign off on it, saying we concur they are following all requirements. This is a lead-in to our certification review that we have to do every 4 years. So I'm getting all the paperwork together for that review. So very exciting time for me. And this is pretty common for TMAs, so areas of our size to have this in here. FHWA did reach out to me and remind me that it needs to be done, and did send me a number of different examples of what it would look like for the backup documentation, which I have together, but not before you today. I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. And I mean, we did earlier in the year review the tips, and we're very aware of the fact that putting out a public comment, getting lots of comments, making adjustments. We wanted to get all those changes that we could before the air quality conformity determination, so that hopefully there's not too many more changes now. So the next cycle, let's say that everything does go through, we won't have to do this though, right? With the or the air quality conformity determination, and then that extra part of the process shouldn't be there.
No, it will be, because we have that requirement for 10 years. So we'll have another 2.5 tip cycles that we're gonna have to do the air quality conformity determination requirements for, as long as we don't mess up.
Got it. Okay, Donna, I was hoping that was, yeah. But okay, I guess it is what it is. So are there any questions or comments from the committee? the tip. Go ahead, Troy.
I have a question about the narrative. Aaron, I see that you included our program of projects information on our table in the tip. Is that language in the narrative somewhere? And would it hurt to put that in there? Maybe like in the public involvement section?
We could, let's see, just a second.
And then my other question is, I don't know my CFRs by heart, but in your self-certification, does the program of project CFR included in your self-certification list?
I actually don't have the ability to answer that.
I know. I can check after the meeting, maybe we can make an amendment between now and the policy committee if it's not.
So this self-certification list was given to me by FHWA as you see it. so that-
It may not have the FTA.
So this is as FHWA wants it to be done. But the comment about the program of projects and the narrative, that is a good point, and if everyone else agrees, I would recommend we add that into the narrative. And maybe I can get your help on making sure, do I just take the language from the tip and put it in here?
It's fine with me.
Okay.
It's fine. That was it.
There, language from one of the tables.
Table 9 at the very end. Transit and the railroad use this process. The TIP process is the public involvement process for our FTA required program of projects. So when we do our triennials, they always look for that language.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Are there any, I guess one question I did have, so some of the descriptions that are in here, like I was looking through and the fire weed, for example, gives some specifics as to what that rehabilitation would include. Basically road diet, 4 lanes for 3 lanes. Does that, by having that specified, mean that that's the only alternative that could be approved?
Technically, yes. But I'm already planning on doing an amendment whenever this tip gets approved to adjust some of that language.
As long as it's a little bit more broad so that the visioning process can actually look at some of the different things.
Yeah, it'll be a pretty quick, easy change that the members of the public kind of recommended to us. And we talked about it at the policy committee when they approved this for the interagency consultation, and they never made the change. So I have that as noted for me.
Should we make any changes now or should we just wait for the policy committee?
I would recommend we wait and do it as part of the amendment so that it can be more transparent.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Are there any questions or comments then from the policy committee members or the public? Okay. What is the will of the committee?
I move to recommend the 2023-2026 TIP and TIP narrative with the change of adding language about the program of projects and a staff review to make sure the self-certification has the required FTA CFR for the program of projects.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Rudolph, seconded by Mr. Colhiggs. Are there any objections to approving the motion stated? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay, there we go. We got through all of those 3 action items. Moving on to 6, project and plan updates. 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, VisionEval introduction.
Yes, I will do a quick couple of things and then turn it over to consultants to talk about this. So first, if we can hold questions on this until after the presentation is done, there may be a lot of questions, but the presentation does give a lot of information, so it might be best to wait and help answer your questions and keep us moving along. It is about a 20-minute presentation, so just kind of get yourself ready for that. And it's really important to have everyone pay attention to this presentation because we will be having a work session in September where we'll be needing input from you all, and that'll be explained as part of the presentation. So Jeff, if you want to go ahead, Jeff Verconja is with our consultant team.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Thanks to the committee members for hearing us out today, and nice to meet you all. First of all, a sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Second of all, a visual check. Are the slides coming through on your side?
Yes, they are. Let's hold on just a second, Jeff. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Again, thanks very much for hearing us out today. My name's Jeff Verconja. I am the sub-consultant project manager on the forecasting support for your MTP update. With me today, I have Gabby Freeman, who is one of our excellent analysts. She's here to talk about some of the technical details that pertain to the topic. As Aaron said, there's a lot of information here. If you could hold questions till the end, we'd appreciate that. You can also type them in the chat room if they occur to you while we're going, and then we'll pick them off in the order received. We have a roadmap here for this briefing to you. Our overarching purpose here is to familiarize you with a part of the planning process called the performance-based planning elements of it, to make clear your role as the TAC and also the policy committee's role in this sub-process of the overall plan update, and then introduce you to the technical tool that's supporting this part of the planning process, what it is, a little bit on how it works, and then talk clearly about the next steps that you'll be involved in, both at the September joint work session as well as after that. And I have my slides are there. They're advancing. Are they advancing? You should see the agenda now.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Okay. Great. So moving on, we have as I just stated, we want to be sure that you're clear on the process we're going through. And I'm sure you all know that we are collectively in the middle of updating your regional transportation plan or metropolitan transportation plan, and that some things have been done already. You have already defined goals and objectives, and you have specified performance measures to be used in the sense of performance-based planning, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And you've established some prioritization criteria for your investments. And so we're at the point now, which I happen to think of as the really fun part, where we're starting to define what the content of the plan may be by the time you adopt it. So we're starting to look out into the future of what could be. And if you look at this then from the point of view of the public engagement process that you have conducted, the outcomes I just mentioned on the previous slide have led to the point where you've taken project nominations, which as an analyst I would characterize as the capital investment possibilities for the final plan when you adopt it. And so this performance-based planning element that you and staff have built into the overall planning process is going to launch basically now. And what that means is that the planning process is tying the final content of the plan, presumably a collection of policies, programmatic investments, and capital investments, to the performance targets that you set based on your planning goals, and that then you measure based on the performance measures that you've already discussed. So those project nominations are a key part of the ingredients, as I call them, of what's in your final plan. If your final plan is the cake, you're in the process now of defining potential mixes of ingredients or potential recipes on how to bake that cake over time. So I'm going to delve now a little bit into the performance-based planning part of all this. And this illustration on your screen now is a schematic that conceptually puts together what we're going to work with you on over the next several months. As mentioned a moment ago, you've already defined a set of planning goals and objectives. So that's the first rectangle on the far left. This is a generic example that we use to talk about the particular strategic model that we're applying, but I'm sure that your goals are very similar to these. And so you've done that work. The second step now is what you're involved in now. You've got some project nominations. And so those capital investments taken together with potential programs that the plan could invest more in, taken together with policies that the plan sets, are what could be in the plan in some mix of different levels, different sets of projects, different types of programs. And so you don't know at this point in time, though, the best recipe to bake the cake that you want to have at the end of let's say 2050, when your investments have been realized and your programs have been implemented. So the task of the performance-based planning process, as we are implementing it now, is to use the strategic model to help you figure out what ingredient mix is going to get you the right cake. And so that third box signifies that staff, together with a consultant team, will apply this strategic model. And we're going to run a whole bunch of scenarios and then come back to you with indicators of what mixes produce results closest to your goals. And we'll spend a lot more time today talking about what that looks like and what to expect. The point here is that you've really defined the first two boxes here, and then now we're going to pick it up and do some analytic work to bring it back to you. In a calendar view, then, what that looks like is we're here today with you on August 11th. The policy committee on August 25th will get a shorter version of this briefing. And then throughout August and early September, AMAT staff, working closely with the consultant team, will finalize and run the model in what we call an exploratory mode, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in subsequent slides. And then, as Aaron has already mentioned, in late September, we'll have a joint work session with you and the policy committee where you'll get to see the findings, in other words, the potential mixes of ingredients, and give us guidance on whether we're getting close enough for you to form the draft alternatives for further analysis, or whether you need us to go back and do some more strategic modeling to get you closer to the mark. And so given the cadence of your committee meetings, then on November 3rd, you will find a briefing. We'll be back to talk about the final results of the performance-based planning process. And then the key decision point is on the 17th of November. The policy committee will then give guidance to the staff and consultant team to turn all that information into, or start turning it into, your draft alternatives. And then those alternatives will be analyzed with a travel demand model in calendar 2023. Now, that's an important point I want you to take away from this. There are now two models in play. There's a strategic model that AMATS has engaged the consultants to apply at this part of the process, and then your travel model will be applied to do the detailed analysis later. So with that said, I promised you a review of what your role is and what the policy committee's role will be. And so at this point in time, particularly in September.
Sorry, Jeff,
Yes?
is your slide supposed to be moving forward? Because it has not been.
Oh, my apologies. There's some technological difficulties at my end. So here's the calendar slide that I was just alluding to. Thanks, Aaron, for catching that. Are you seeing that now at your end?
Yes, we are.
All right. And then you'll get copies of these slides. And then at this, are you seeing the slide now that says the TAC and PC roles?
Yes, we are.
Excellent, thank you. So at this point, as I wanted to do, I want to be clear on what you folks are tasked with doing and what to expect over the next several months. So when we come back to you in September, you will see that we have applied the goals and the various elements or actions or ingredients to the strategic modeling. At that point, we'll want you to sort of affirm that we've got the mix right. But more importantly, you'll see intermediate results that attempt to say that a particular scenario will meet your goals in a certain way. And at that point, the ask to you will be to review those findings and to give us some advice on whether they're reaching your goals sufficiently or whether we should turn up the dial, so to speak, on certain types of actions, whether it's capital investments, programmatic tactics, or, for example, operational improvements to your transport system. And then at that November timeframe, that's when the policy committee will look at those final results and give guidance on how the draft alternatives for the plan should be shaped given that information. So your role, as I understand it, is to be the technical minds that look at these results and give the policy committee advice for their November meeting. With that said, I will turn it over to Gabby to give you some of the fun details about how the VisionEval model works, as we call it. Gabby?
Thanks, Jeff. So like Jeff mentioned, I'm going to be going into more details on the Regional Strategic Planning Model, the RSPM, and how it can be leveraged for performance-based planning and exploratory scenario planning. So first, I want to briefly discuss why we're choosing to apply this particular tool. As shown in the visual on the left, strategic models occupy a unique niche in the overall modeling landscape. They utilize some features of more complex types of models, but overall they can be considered a lightweight tool. Specifically, strategic models don't incorporate a spatial roadway network like other travel models, but instead they estimate travel by using household detail. The strategic model synthesizes a set of households and uses characteristic like household location, income, and life cycle to estimate household travel behavior. So by design, strategic models have a fast runtime, and they're able to explore many different iterations or scenarios. And because of this, they are able to explore a large decision space and try to answer the question, what can happen? We can also use a strategic model in search mode, or as Jeff alluded to, the exploratory mode, where we use it to identify specific scenarios of interest that we can evaluate in more detail using other models or tools. You can advance, Jeff. So RSPM is one of several models developed and maintained by the VisionEval project. Some key attributes to highlight about VisionEval and all the VisionEval suite of models are that they are estimated with readily available data from the National Household Travel Survey. They are, like I mentioned, designed to run quickly. We can run hundreds of scenarios in a relatively short time frame. The results of the model can be explored in an interactive HTML-based visualizer, and they're also available as CSV output files. The VisionEval project itself is open source. It's implemented in the R programming language. You can find the entire code base, look under the hood, it's all on GitHub, and it's supported by a pooled fund that is managed by FHWA and has DOT and NPO user members. Next slide, please. I'm now going to speak to the work that we have currently done to set up RSPM for the AMATS region. So as Jeff mentioned, RSG is also working on updating the regional travel demand trip-based model. And so we're able to leverage that particular model in helping to stand up the RSPM. The first step in setting up our model is establishing what we call the base model, which reflects current conditions and the latest forecasts. The base model inputs are developed for 2 years, 2019, and we have a forecast year of 2050. The data that we're using from the travel model in the RSPM include the zonal structure, which is shown in the map, land use data, population and housing data, and employment data. Once we set up those initial inputs, we'll also use the regional travel model to help calibrate our RSPM. And calibration is a process where we're testing the model and making adjustments to ensure that the results align with real world observed conditions across a variety of key metrics, such as VMT. You can go to the next slide, please. So once we have our base model complete, the next step is developing scenarios. And this part is still to come. It'll be the focus of our workshop coming up in September. You can go to the next slide. So when we're saying scenarios, they can be thought of alternative futures that we're going to compare against our base model and reference scenario. Any model input in RSPM can be used to create a scenario. This slide shows some of those different options of inputs that we have categorized by changes in demographics and land use, local policy actions and pricing, and changes in transportation supply. I'm not going to read through every single option here due to the time that we have, but I just want to highlight a few examples. For changes in demographics and land use, for instance, we could develop a scenario that shows additional population growth over the current forecast, or changes in the character and extent of development, such as higher density housing. For local policy actions and pricing, RSPM has a number of built-in policy files that are designed explicitly for scenario testing, a few examples being parking pricing programs, congestion fees, or VMT fees. For changes in transportation supply, we could develop scenarios to look at changes in infrastructure or changes in the vehicle fleet, like increased adoption of electric vehicles. And you can also test the increased use of alternative modes, such as transit or biking. Next slide. So with all of those options in mind, this slide shows how we set up the scenario testing structure. So the first step is deciding on which inputs we want to include in testing. And because, as you saw on the previous slide, there are so many options to choose from, a common tactic is to group related inputs into a set of categories. For each category of inputs, we then have several levels of change from our base or reference scenario. Once we define the categories and the levels, the strategic model runs all combinations of our scenario input levels. So the total number of scenarios is a function of the number of categories and the number of levels in each of those categories. So for example, if we have 5 categories and each category has 3 levels, then we're going to have 3 to the 5th power, or 243 total scenarios. Next slide. So this is the fun step, the results. And the results can be viewed in the interactive HTML viewer I referenced earlier. The layout of the viewer that you can see here in the top row of charts are the scenario input levels in the various categories. So the L1, I know it's kind of small text, but L1 refers to level 1, which is always going to correspond to the base model. And levels 2 and up are the scenario inputs that are being tested. And on the bottom charts, you have different performance metrics. both of these sets of charts are selectable. So by interacting with them, you can explore the different correlations between the performance metrics in your scenario inputs. Overall, this is a tool that we're using to help digest a large amount of data that results from the model runs. So you can see in this particular example, we're looking at the outputs of 432 total scenarios in a pretty accessible format. Next slide. So here's an example of using the scenario viewer to explore the results. So you can see in the bottom right-hand box that a selection has been made on the lower half of the air pollution emissions metric, and it filters the results to only show the scenarios that correspond with that selection. So we're showing the results of 198 scenarios out of the total. And then on the top, you can now see what scenario input levels correspond with the lower air pollution or GHG emissions. So you can use the scenario viewer in this way to explore and see what policies are driving different outcomes. Next slide. This is my last slide before I turn it back over to Jeff. But it just shows an example of how we can use other models and tools to analyze a select number of scenarios in more detail. So if you think back to the visual of the strategic model as our sieve, we are using it to process and filter a lot of information, and then we can select 2, 3, 4 specific scenarios of interest to look at with the regional travel model or other tools. On this slide, we're showing an example from our household scenario explorer, and it's showing the results from 2 scenarios. On the top row of those boxes, you have household metrics from the base scenario, and then on the bottom row, we're showing a low VMT scenario and the percent change from the base. Sorry, was there a question?
There is one question. Should I read it?
We'll go ahead and get to that in a minute. You keep going, it's okay.
Okay, well that was really all I have, and I was getting ready to turn it over to Jeff. So thanks all for your attention.
All right, thanks, Gabby. So I'm before we get into what to expect next, I just want to return to this slide and point out that while you can't see the fine print today, this is the type of information in graphical form that you'll be getting in September. So the staff will have turned the goals, objectives, and project nominations and policy choices into all these scenario definitions that Gabby walked through that are customized to your planning choices in your region. We'll run these hundreds of scenarios, and given the guidance that you've already given, come back to you with sort of here's hopefully a manageable number of scenario mixes that then you can sort through. And then, as I said a moment ago, if we're not reaching targets on mobility or accessibility or environmental indicators like emissions, then you can give us further guidance to turn up the dials or turn down the dials or whatever might need to be done. So let's go back then to the process of what to expect next. As we've said several times here, the staff and consultant team will look at all the things that you've already decided upon, set up the model and run it, and then you will see us at the joint work session in September. We'll show you the base model calibration because we always like people to understand how well the model is doing against observed reality in the base case. That hopefully builds confidence in the future cases. And then, you'll get a chance to look at the results and suggest how we might tweak the dials if you think that's necessary. Remember that the point at that moment in November is to help you folks define your draft plan alternatives. So you're not making one choice. You have a variety of goals and objectives like any planning organization. And so you may have some trade-off choices to make. And so we'll be helping you think about ways to set up the draft alternatives for further analysis at that point. And then what that leads us to now, this is really at the point where we turn it over to you folks to ask questions or make observations, is that we do have a couple specific questions for you if you would care to address them. The first question is, we obviously want you to understand what's going on so that you can play your role and we can help you. So if you have questions that we can answer right now, or maybe come back to you to answer later, or send supplemental materials, we're happy to hear what those questions are. We want you to feel comfortable with the process and the tool. And then the corollary question, since you have worked with the policy committee quite a bit, and at least the RSG folks on the call have not, we have less time with them on the 25th of August than we had with you today. If you have any suggestions about what of these talking points and visuals you've heard and seen today would most be valuable to them, we'd appreciate that guidance as well. So with that, we're done presenting, and we're open to questions and comments. Thank you.
There's one question from
Yes.
Steve.
Go ahead, we can do comments and questions if you want to.
Okay, and it looks like the question from Steve, I missed seeing it. I think it was part of our prior.
I don't know if it is or not, but Steve has his question up. If you want to go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was, yeah, it took me longer to turn my mic back on than I thought it would. So through all the years of my sitting on this committee and going through the creation of TIPS, it's been mostly a spectator sport as the port director, because most of what has been in the TIP for the longest time has been related to roads and rail and bike paths and all other kinds of things that aren't ports. But since the advent of IIJA, there has been greater opportunity for ports to be able to put projects into the TIP, I think. And if that's an expectation, or if it's something that that we ought to just stay off to the side and let the FHWA guys continue to rule, and watch and help vote for things you think are really important, not from a necessity standpoint, but just because pragmatically they seem like the right thing to do. You talked a lot about models, and I don't know enough about how this process works nuts and bolts wise, having been just a spectator, but what's going to be the input to these models?
I think I'll field that and probably have to hand it over to Aaron or other AMAT staff for the TIP connection. But the strategic model that we're describing in this part of the process of getting you to draft, remember there's several steps. So you're defining draft alternatives now. So the strategic model can take inputs like, we want a lot more lane miles of roadway capacity, or we want a lot more transit service, or we have a policy where we are trying to promote demand management strategies, where as we've learned recently, there are some activities where developers can talk to the municipality of Anchorage and lower their parking minimums for things like that. You can price the roadway system, you can change pricing in the transit system, and things like that. I don't, if you have a specific investment in mind that would benefit the port, maybe you could describe that and we could talk about how it would be reflected in the modeling. But you may actually have a question that's more for the previous topic about how you folks put together your TIP, which we're not talking about in the long range planning process. So that's my answer. Aaron, do you want maybe to address some of this?
I mean, I guess I would wait and see if Steve has any kind of follow-up.
Well, I guess then my next question would be, so all of this that we've just talked about, where does it fit into the process of creating a tip?
Sure. So I'll take a quick stab at that since I've worked for MPOs and consulted for MPOs. Under federal regulations that Aaron alluded to during your business item, the investments in the tip must be consistent with the long-range plan, or you call it the 2050 MTP. That's your working title. So the planning process will create a document that includes statements of policy, statements of that you'll invest in certain programs like demand management programs, or maybe there's a program to enhance freight throughput efficiency, for example, it might interest you. And the plan generally includes a list of investments, capital investments, programmatic investments. And once the plan is adopted, the tip must be consistent with that. So when I was sitting in Aaron's seat at an MPO, my answer to you would have been that you want to help give input to the long range plan, the MTP, so that the MTP policy statements and investments are things that are consistent with your goals at the port. But that's all I should say now, because it's really not I'm not on the staff of AMATS. I'm supporting them with forecasting. So Aaron, over to you on that question.
Yeah, I mean, think about it as the MTP is kind of our first step in helping build future tips, because we pull projects from the MTP and the goals and objectives help guide what projects we put into the tip.
So if you're in it now, you're part of what gets assessed. If you're not, then it's it's an exercise you participate in. It is of no value to your, in my case, to the port, since we really don't have anything in the MTP.
I mean, I wouldn't say that, because even if it's not something, you could be assessed and, included in the tip and then updated to have the MTP, or if you're consistent with the MTP, it's good enough. I mean, I would always encourage you to participate, because like you said, IIJA has changed the game a little and has started making it to where putting projects on the port into the tip is more of a possibility than it has been in the past. And your comment that you had in the chat asking, is there an advantage to being a project in the tip and competitiveness for IIJA grants? It's actually a requirement for any federal funded project to be in the tip and consistent with the MTP. And any of the IIJA grants that are out there have part of their notice of funding opportunity statements in there to talk about being consistent with the MTPs and the tips. So we often encourage people to let AMATS know if they've received a grant, so we can get it into the tip early when they want to actually get the funding from FHWA.
And in our case, it wouldn't really be, sometimes it'll be from FHWA, sometimes it'll be from MARAD. Does it matter?
Yes, we are looking at FHWA FTA only funding for the tip and the MTP.
Okay, all right. I think I probably should have asked the question that way first. So if we don't have an FHWA nexus with a project going on down here, then we can march on our merry way and not have to worry about how qualitatively it gets assigned a number that gives it a priority in the tip, because it doesn't necessarily have to be in the tip.
Yeah, we do have a weird requirement as well that any regionally significant project, regardless of funding source, has to be in the tip and the MTP. So we do kind of have that caveat. What defines regionally significant? There is no real definition, so that it's up to the state and AMATS to make that determination with working with FHWA.
Okay, I won't take up any more of your time on today, but we probably I probably ought to make an appointment to come down and talk to you, Aaron, more about this.
Good, my door's open.
So if I can just offer one observation on this, as we outlined the process that you've already done to update the MTP, you recently had a project nominations process that included some stakeholder engagement. So if I'm understanding your point correctly, Stephen, you would want to be sure that these regionally significant projects that Aaron is alluding to are on the radar in this MTP update, so that AMATS is aware of the port is thinking about investing in X, Y, or Z, and that there's some project definition that you could supply to the MTP process. That's what I would usually expect given my work with MPOs.
Yeah, and that's a good assessment, because we've got at least one road project that's legitimately a road project, and one project we would like to do jointly with the railroad that is all on the port that might very well be worth putting in the MTP, so that it has the visibility, and so that as we write grant applications against them, that we can say that's the case.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on this topic?
Do we have any committee questions?
I could sure use a clarification as to what RSPM is versus VisionEval, or formulation of the strategic model. I didn't quite understand.
Did you hear that, Jeff?
Yes, I think the question was to define the acronyms RSPM, terms like VisionEval and RSG, right?
Please.
So RSPM stands for Regional Strategic Planning Model. It is a specific instance of the VisionEval overall framework, right, Gabby?
Right. VisionEval is the overarching project, and it includes a suite of models. So the RSPM is the regional model. There's also a state level VisionEval model, and there's another even lighter weight, more sketch planning regional tool. So like Jeff said, VisionEval is the framework, it's the overarching project, and then RSPM is the specific VisionEval model that we're applying in this case.
And I think you asked about RSG. RSG is our firm's name. We are the Resource Systems Group. That's what that acronym stands for. And we're a sub to R&M, the prime consultant who is supporting AMATS on the MTP update.
Thanks, Jeff. That's quite a few acronyms there. Okay, any other questions? That was very, very informative. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to our work session in September. Where do we go from here, Aaron?
That's all we had, unless we need to see if any comments from the public.
Okay, any questions or comments from the public on this topic? Okay, it looks like we're good to move on to the next topic,
Yep.
right?
Thank you, Jeff, very much. It was appreciated of your help.
Thank you all. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Gabby.
Okay, so moving on to item 6B, the Ocean Dock Road Reconnaissance Study. We're going to have a project plan update.
Yes, there will be a quick presentation. Galen Jones with DOT, the project manager, is here, and he can go and kind of introduce.
Okay, take it away, Galen.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Yeah, as Aaron said, I'm Galen Jones with Alaska DOT. Here with GD, and we're here to discuss or give you an update on the Ocean Dock Road Reconnaissance Study. 1 year ago, we met with this committee to introduce the team and present the goals of the study, and to tell you what our hopeful outcomes would be. Since then, the team's been pretty busy. We've met with stakeholders, done other public involvement, outreach. We published a concept report and a draft reconnaissance report, which brings us here today to present that draft report to you. So with that said, I'll hand everything over to Jeannie.
All right. Okay, looks like the
screen's not quite big enough to go with.
Oh, just zoom out.
There we go. Okay.
Sorry.
So just real quick, this is the project team, DOT, Kinney Engineering, and we have HDR providing rail expertise. So a reminder of what is this project. So this is in the port area, the road into the port, Ocean Dock Road. So north in this diagram is to the right. So from Whitney Road, Ship Creek, north into the port to Rogers Grave Road. That's the area that we're looking at. We did a previous recon study about 3 or 4 years ago where that X is that intersection. We looked at that intersection and made some suggestions of improvements to that intersection. And then it became apparent that if we looked a little more broadly and specifically at sort of the rail and the road and how they worked together, that we might have an overall better project that would give us more improvement, helps out more. So that's what this study is looking at that bigger area to look for how can we kind of solve all of the problems that we want to solve. So as a recon study basically is providing information to decision makers so they can make decisions about what kinds of projects they want to do. So we're identifying purpose and need, high level at possible solutions, and then just a little more in depth at the most feasible ones. What does that look like? What does that give us? How much does that cost at a planning level? That's what we're doing. So purpose and need that we've identified these 6 areas. Kind of the biggest thing is to where the road and the rail cross each other to reduce delay there. Trucks get stopped when the trains go through, trains stop to let trucks through. How can we reduce that delay? The truckers gave us some information about operational issues that they had, and so we're trying to address those. There's not been a lot of crashes in this area, but if there is a crash, it could be big. It could have a big impact. So we want to reduce the likelihood of a crash. Even though this is an industrial area, it also has non-motorized demand, the Ship Creek Trail and Government Hill where people live and want to travel in between those two, so on foot or on bike. So looking at non-motorized connectivity and safety, maintenance and drainage kind of go together. There's some drainage issues that make maintenance of the road and the rail kind of an ongoing thing that has to happen. And then there's also things like vehicles hitting the rail equipment that if we could reduce that would also reduce maintenance burden. So we did, as Galen said, conceptual study that we finished in March. We looked at what should we do with non-motorized users. We looked at how could we improve drainage. We had 4 different concepts for the railroad, and we have had 4 different concepts for the road and kind of looked at how they fit together. And we met with the technical advisory group who gave us a lot of input on all of that. And we ended up with one build alternative that just kind of came to the top. So this is the whole thing, and I'm going to go in deeper at the, talk a little bit more about each of these different areas so you can see what's happening. But in general, the idea is to move the rail line that goes into the port from the east side of the road to the west side of the road. And then there's some other improvements that go along with that. And that solves 2 key areas where the rail and road cross, that it solves delay and safety at those 2 key spots really well. So now I'm at the very south end of the project area. So Ship Creek, north is to the top. Ship Creek is running east-west across the bottom. And I'll start with the Whitney Road intersection. The idea or the proposal here is to reconfigure the road so that the main truck movement, which is from Ocean Dock Road onto Whitney Road. Right now, they're making a pretty sharp left turn out and a pretty sharp right turn in, that's a smooth curve, and there's no stopping at that intersection, at the Whitney Ocean Dock intersection for that main movement. It also clarifies the traffic control. Right now, as you're crossing the North C Street Bridge, you stop. If you're on Whitney Road, you stop, but you don't stop as you're coming south on Ocean Dock Road. That's so there's not queues across the tracks. Like people stopped on the tracks as they're stopped at the stop sign. And this, and people get confused by that. Sometimes people on North C Street are expecting someone to stop on Ocean Dock Road and they go, they move anyway. There's a few different concerns with that. This solves those. This also, that's the tight turns, the tight right and left turns from Ocean Dock to Whitney. Sometimes trucks are hitting the rail equipment there. And the railroad also, if there's oversized vehicles, they have to come out and flag them through this area. This will hopefully solve both of those problems. So that's the intention. Oh, before I leave the slide, to the north, you can see, so the green highlight is where the rail is now, and we're proposing to move it to the yellow highlight with the red track. That would be new rail. In the area by Whitney Road, all of those changes to the rail are, things have to move in order for the road to move. So that's all because of this road improvement we're making. But on the north side of the slide, we're taking that north leg of the passenger way and moving it to the southwest. And that would help consolidate those crossings together so that it's easier to signalize, kind of puts them together to be signalized. And that also sets us up for the movement that we're trying to make later of moving the rail across Ocean Dock Road to the north. Pedestrians highlighted. The new pedestrian path here is in purple. What's already out there is in pink. So we're proposing a pathway that crosses the rail as much as possible at a right angle, which is beneficial for the bicycles, and that's signalized so that as pedestrians are traveling on it and the train's coming, it stops the pedestrians, lets them know trains coming, don't cross. Okay, so moving to the north, now you see the rail is moving from the west side of the road to the east side of the road. The intersection improvements here, everywhere where the road is dark, that's new road. These were what was recommended in the previous study and already kind of accepted and we were going to move forward with it. We've checked and made sure it still works. It makes the curve, gives it a bigger radius, so it's a less steep, but less, whatever, what am I trying to say?
More side distance.
Yes, gives you better sight distance around the hill there. Fin drain to help with the drainage. And I do have the pedestrian stuff highlighted. Right now, pedestrians aren't allowed along the ramps, so we're finding a path for them over to where the existing path goes from Government Hill across across the C Street Bridge, and into the port. That's a wide shoulder is what we're proposing for pedestrian movements. All right, continuing north. Now north is to your right. Basically, this is moving the rail from the west to the east. Thank you. I have a right, left, east, west problem. It does have to move. The road has to move. They kind of swap places a little bit, the rail and the road. There's some spur lines to serve the companies that are on the east side of the road. Those aren't used very often. And I think they're usually used at night. So those will be significantly less impacts than existing crossings.
And traffic be controlled for those railroad dog legs.
So I don't know if it's,
Or, yes, there really isn't.
yeah, I don't know if it's signalized or yield or how it goes, but it's as a typical crossing of that, whatever that amount of
There's
crossing
a
is.
process that we go through with these sorts of new processes and so forth like that. That's state policy that fairly formulaic. We sit down with Kenny will be involved, DOT will be involved, CORE will be involved, and the whole function of that diagnostic process is to assess the safety of the crossing and determine what sort of action needs to be.
I know they're there together, just have a human. By each. Oh, sorry.
And then moving all the way to the north, this just kind of finishes what happens when you move the rail to the other side of the road, fixes some driveways and things like that. I should probably, that's not that. So this crossing, the green highlight right here where the Ocean Dock Road curves, kind of where number 6 is, that crossing is the highest volume crossing. The most trains and the most trucks together at this crossing. So we saw a huge amount of delay by moving this crossing, by getting rid of this crossing. And then also we've had complaints from truckers about the sight distance here, being able to see when trucks are stopped, when the train is crossing here. It solves that problem as well. The other big crossing is this crossing at the bottom left corner of the screen, where the rail crosses Ocean Dock Road to serve the cement spur and petrol tar spur. That also has been identified as a problematic crossing. DOT has been working with the railroad to try and get a short-term solution here, and this eliminates that crossing. It moves the crossing of Anchorage Port Road like to an area that has good sight distance, so trucks can see the trains and trains can see the trucks. So that's improvement. There's a lot of challenges in this area. Right of way, this is mostly railroad, muni or port land. We want to minimize impacts to leasable land, so that's one of the reasons why we've chosen this alternative. Utilities coordination is going to be really, really important. There's underground gas, fuel, telephone, water, sanitary, sewer, overhead electric. Yesterday at the freight committee, we talked about there's a way in motion out there that will need to be handled. Steve brought up that the gate into the port is right there, and we'll have to move that and get it all the electric and everything that it needs. So there's a lot of coordination with utilities. The bluff around Government Hill is being used as parkland. There are historic properties there, so we'll need to address those issues. And then traffic control during congestion will be really important because we have to continue the rail service and continue the road as we do construction. So that's also a big challenge to overcome. So we're in the review stage. We have the draft study. Already DOT, the Freight Advisory Committee, and members of the MOA have looked at it. We're doing the presentations to the AMATS committees this month. At the end of this month, it'll go out for public comment for 30 days. Do revisions at the end of September, have the final study in October, and then it's ready for programming and funding. And right now our cost estimate is about 40 million. That's what I've got. We'd love your comments as soon as it goes out to public comment. If we want to hit as many people as possible to get comments in.
Okay, thanks, Jeannie. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee?
Does the bluff remain at its same height with the retaining wall, or does that get altered in the process?
So the retaining wall would get pushed back.
It'd be a taller.
It would, yeah.
Okay, other questions? Bart?
Can you go back to figure C, I think the middle section? Oh, no, maybe this one, yeah. On the pedestrian access ways connecting with the pink, is there a reason why the pedestrian sidewalk goes to the middle of that Y and comes down instead of just straight across? Because as a pedestrian, it seems very uncomfortable to be standing right at that spot to cross the street where maybe you could just go straight across further up, like with the other crossing.
So I would not say that the pedestrian crossings are set in stone at this point. I do know there's some grade issues, like it's going up a grade here. So I think it's related to grade issues,
Okay.
that's why we brought it down there.
Yeah, just to the right of that, underneath the legend there is a bridge. And then to the roadway to the left is the road that goes under that bridge. So there's probably a 20+ foot grade difference around there.
So probably
That would be
aerial
ideal.
versus being there in
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We thought about that and
Yeah.
we unfortunately had to rule it out with an AD or an accessible type.
If I'm not mistaken, at the point that you have to switch between the new pedestrian area and the jump over to the middle one, the trucks are climbing up a hill, so that's fairly slow entryway for them. It's not like they're coming in at you 30 miles an hour.
We have it here or here.
There.
Yeah, that isn't the existing crossing, that is there now. I don't know that trucks are going slow there usually, but that is where it is.
Thinking of pedestrian standing here, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
These trucks are just starting out.
Yeah.
After crossing the intersection.
Instead of crossing that grade, you could run them along the road that goes underneath and maybe go underneath the bridge and circle back up. Grade needs to be fighting grade, but get rid of the at-grade crossing. That's. So,
I think you're saying,
so rather than go on the up, have the pedestrians go on the up ramp, have the pedestrians go on the down ramp and, yeah, and go underneath there.
Cross underneath.
Yeah. Then
Yeah.
go back on.
the grades make lots of things difficult.
They do. They'll work fine one direction.
How much pedestrian activity? How much pedestrian activity did you see?
So we looked at the pedestrian activity here as part of the previous study. I think we had like actually using the paths to go across the bridge, like something like probably 20 in a few hours or something. Although we saw a school group take that route, walking downtown from Government Hills Elementary. So it's decently well used, that path.
It's right outside my window, and I'm always amazed at the number
Yeah.
of heads and bikes going through the middle of all that. I mean, you've got right there at the where you go over Ship Creek, there's obviously a lot of attraction there with the fishing and everything else going on, but there's joggers, there's bikers, and I feel like they probably just got lost, but they keep coming back, so.
There, I would say like 10 we saw on the ramps and just just all over the place, every route imaginable. There's no consistency to how they use the ramps. And it says they're not allowed to, but
But
they
they
are.
have social trails there too.
yeah. Social trails straight up to Government Hill, right?
We also might see more activity as AMATS constructs the completion of the Ship Creek Coastal Trail connection. That might increase in this area, so just kind of keep that in mind as we.
Yeah, it'll be the shortest connection from Government Hill to that whole trail network.
It does feel to me like roads first, pedestrian second, like all these crossings, and you're just trying to like figure out how the pedestrians get around the roads. But I understand with the grades, it's probably challenging. like you're doing all these crossings. It doesn't seem ideal, but it's also a challenging spot.
Did I hear you suggest this one be underground tunnel across here and then continue?
Well, no, what I would do, like,
Same.
yeah, if you go literally another 30 feet towards the bottom of the map, you're actually underneath the bridge at that point. But to Phoebe's point, to get from that one ramp down underneath, it's gonna be pretty circuitous just to get the grades to work out.
Yeah. This crossing is a very low volume vehicle crossing, so it's comfortable for pedestrians from that point of view, or not. There's not that many cars taking that route. And I mean, you're right, the road is built there, so and we're not touching any bridge structure. That was one of the limitations of the intersection study, not to touch any bridge structure. So
Okay, other questions? Any questions from the public? Okay, well, thank you so much, Jeannie, for coming and presenting. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. We need to note, okay, so please note that no coin is not finished, we need to take off. And we're moving on to item 6C, Transportation Systems Management Operations, or TSMO update.
Yes, really quickly, I just wanted to give everyone a quick update on TSMO. Thank you all for your participation recently on that. We are going to actually have an online open house starting September 1st through the 15th. So this will be an online open house that an individual can log into and just peruse as they want. There will not be staff available there to answer questions directly, but if questions are left, staff will respond to them as quickly as possible. Based on input from the consultants, this has worked well in other areas, so we're going to try it here and see how it goes. So just be on the lookout for that. We will send out more information as we get closer. This is just a very quick heads up that it's coming. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, thank you, Aaron. Any questions from the committee on that? Or public? Okay, moving on then to item 7, general information. I don't see anything on there. Item 8, any members of the committee that have a comment to provide? Go ahead. We're committee comments. We're in item 8.
All right, just real quickly, the window is closing, but STIP Amendment 4 is out for public review. So if you got any comments, look through that and send them in.
When does that close?
The 15th.
Okay. Other members of the committee have any updates or comments to present to the group today? How about public comments? Any additional public comments? Okay, looks like we are ready to adjourn at 3:58.
Hurry up.